Daily Bible Time, Dominic Steele, and it's the 8th of February, Wednesday morning. We're in chapter 19 of Chris Watkin's book, and it's Biblical Critical Theory, and we're working through this day by day. We're up to the chapter called The Cross, Asymmetry and Paradox, and the Cross, Asymmetry and Paradox. And I'm going to only do the first bit of the chapter this morning. Just the top line in the chapter. The cross, as we've begun to see, is a figure of superabundance. It stands in a relationship of asymmetry to sin, in the same way that creation stands in a relationship of asymmetry to the fall. This asymmetry is expressed in the how much more language of the New Testament, which Watkin notes, G.K. Chesterton identifies as the heart of Christ's rhetoric, where sin gets picked up by Paul, where sin increased, grace increased all the more, or how much more shall we be saved from God's wrath through him. When he turns to the section on asymmetry and the event of the cross, he says the cross is something non-linear, something that doesn't follow the predictable unfolding of cause and effect. Forgiveness, ransom, reconciliation, those words introduce an anomaly into the grim ledger of sin and death, into the monotonous drumbeat of the one who sins is the one who will die, and a colossal, an enormous, but it's not what you'd expect. It's not what linear justice and equivalence would demand. Now, he then unpacks, and this is a little bit of a surprise, that the cross lifts Christianity out of the iron logic of necessity, of unbreakable cause and effect, up into a logic of superabundance, divine superabundance. It's the raging bull that storms through the staid china shop of demure philosophical concepts, shattering every symmetrical plate, dashing every systematic bowl to the ground in a way that leaves not a trail of destruction, but a grander, richer, and more open imagery than ever before. Now, what I then found fascinating was Watkin says this is not just a truth for philosophers. The logics of equivalence and superabundance make themselves felt at an everyday level as well. And he gives a couple of examples. In the biblical understanding of the world, the logic of equivalence only finds its place and its legitimation inside a logic of superabundance. For example, a major justification for work and private property, the logic of equivalence, is so that Christians will have funds that they can give away, Ephesians 4:28. Earning is justified by giving. Now that verse, Ephesians 4:28, issues a challenge to all of us as we read this book. Do you see your work? Do I see my work through this lens of superabundance? Why do I go to work? So that I can give things away. Or am I blinkered by the ambient logic of equivalence that dictates not that we earn in order to give, but that we earn in order to have? Conversely, in the modern world, the logic of superabundance only finds its place and its legitimation inside a logic of equivalence. Gift giving is reduced to reciprocal calculation of who's in debt to who gave me what amount, what value of gift last Christmas. They baked something for us, we ought to do the same for them. Or in the case of corporate philanthropy, an exercise in public relationship and brand building. Whereas the logic of superabundance is totally different. The logic of superabundance predisposes the Christian life to a predilection for gifts that are not utilitarian. So picking up on the incident in John 12 where Mary pours the expensive perfume on Judas's feet, the one who protests is Judas. He wanted the money spent on the poor. He wanted an enormous money to be spent usefully. Giving to God introduces the useless into the world of efficiency. Now that is an essential witness to faith in today's world. Now, you then go to asymmetry, totality, and the market as his next heading, and the superabundance of the cross disrupts and destabilizes the logic of totality, whether it's expressed in totalitarian government, the state as a total, or the unfettered free market, the market paradigm as total. Both of these organisations, these totalities, opposed though they've often been in political thought, have much in common. They both tend towards squeezing out of society all logics and systems but their own, and they both seek to account for and govern everything, this is Watkin, either in the form of a totalitarian state or a free and unregulated market. But they both create a simple universal space, a flat society in which nothing is off limits to either the market paradigm or state control. However, by contrast to both of these closed and totalitizing paradigms, Christ brings not an economy of credit and exchange, but a divine overflowing of love. The cross confounds the necessity of the market, in which every credit implies a corresponding debit, every transaction must be balanced, and every commodity or service has its equivalent value in every other commodity or service. We're taught that from an early age, this proportionality of reward and effect, this equivalence of performance and success. That is, to quote the carol, that is a system of fast bound in sin and nature's night, tied down and limited at every turn, parsimoniously evaluating proportionate equivalencies, says Watkin. And yet the how much more of the cross smashes that, exposes this closed regulated system of rations and limits as contingent and secondary. Such a system is always reactive, never creative. The how much more of Christ's death and resurrection cracks that open, compared to the careful bookkeeping of the logic of equivalence, compared to the iron fist of totalitarianism. The cross is a riot. It is no coincidence that there's been a rediscovery of Luther's theology of the cross in our century, precisely in those countries where the church must fight against a totalitarian state. Very exciting chapter, the cross, asymmetry and paradox. That's the first part of it, and we'll pick up on part 2 tomorrow morning on Daily Bible Time. See you then. God bless. Thank you, lovely girl.